They called it chaos. We called it potential. They called it overpopulation. We called it human capital. They called it poor. We called it resourceful. And while the world debated statistics, scoffed at accents, mocked tradition, and measured us against their own standards, India stopped waiting for validation. This is not just about a country. This is about resilience redefined. About a people so underestimated, they turned skepticism into fuel. A place where ancient wisdom breathes in the same air as modern innovation. Where the roar of the lion wasn't heard until it was already upon you. We didn't break into the world's stage. We built a new one, quietly, strategically, one decision at a time, one generation at a time, no overnight success, no shortcuts, just grit layered over centuries. And when the world finally looked up, we weren't emerging. We were already there. You want to know how India took over? Discipline, patience, vision. While others were chasing virality, India was building infrastructure. While others outsourced, India was insourcing brilliance, engineers, scientists, coders, creators, builders, visionaries. A billion brains no longer on standby, activated. They didn't just doubt us, they dismissed us. Over and over again, they painted India in one shady struggle. That's all they chose to see. They called us the underdog, the back office, the cheap labor, the burden. But what they never understood, what they never bothered to see, is that underestimation is one of the most powerful weapons in human psychology. Because when people don't expect anything from you, you gain the one advantage that changes everything: the freedom to move without being watched. That underestimation, it wasn't a weakness, it was oxygen, it was fuel. While they were laughing, we were learning. While they were judging, we were sharpening. They looked at our chaos and missed the coordination underneath. They saw poverty, but not the hunger to rise. They mistook silence for weakness. But what they failed to realize is that when the world counts you out, you don't argue, you outwork. India didn't ask for a seat at the table. We built our own table, one block at a time. While the noise distracted the rest of the world, India stayed focused. Not loud, not flashy, just consistent, relentless. And that's the thing about underdogs. They train while everyone else is performing. They build muscle in the dark. And when they show up, they don't arrive to impress. They arrive to win. We were never behind, we were just preparing. And by the time they looked again, it was already too late. Everyone was too busy watching each other, competing for attention, shouting to be seen. Meanwhile, India moved in silence. No loud declarations, no need for headlines, just deliberate, calculated steps forward. That's how power works. Real power doesn't scream, it positions, it observes, it plans. And that's exactly what India did. While global powers were obsessed with dominance, India mastered patience. While others were focused on making noise, India focused on making moves. The world mistook that silence for absence. But in that quiet, something far more dangerous was happening: mastery. Layer by layer, generation by generation. The kind of progress you don't see until it's already shaped the world. And when they finally looked, it wasn't India trying to catch up. It was India setting the pace. The ones who laughed were now listening. The ones who overlooked were now overwhelmed. Because when you grow without applause, you learn to lead without needing it. India didn't rise through spectacle. India rose through substance. Through every unnoticed grind. Through every uncelebrated victory. And that kind of rise, you can't replicate it, you can't fake it. It only comes from years of showing up when no one's watching, and staying the course long after they start. They tried to define us by our wounds, by our past, by everything they thought broke us. Colonialism, partition, poverty, corruption. They expected us to be stuck, to be forever dragging the weight of what happened to us. But what they didn't understand is that in India, pain is not a prison, it's a forge. We didn't forget the scars. We studied them. We turned every hardship into a hard truth, every betrayal into a boundary, every collapse into a comeback. The world looked at our struggles and assumed weakness. But real strength doesn't come from what you're given. It comes from what you survive. And India has survived everything and still showed up standing, stronger, sharper, and more focused than ever. That's the difference. Other nations crumbled under far less. India endured centuries of being stripped, silenced, and stolen from, and still found the will to rebuild. Not just rebuild, reimagine. And that reimagination wasn't born in comfort, it was born in resistance. in resilience, in choosing not to be defined by suffering, but by how we responded to it. We didn't run from our history. We absorbed it, transformed it, weaponized it. Because when you know what it's like to have everything taken, you build in a way that no one can take it from you again. And that's exactly what we did. What they thought would break us became the very thing that made us unbreakable. They saw 1 billion people and called it a burden. Too many mouths, too little means. That's the story they told themselves. But they didn't see what we saw. They didn't see the fire in our youth. They didn't see the scale of ambition simmering beneath the surface. They looked at numbers and saw a problem. We looked at those same numbers and saw unmatched power. Because human capital isn't just about bodies. It's about brains, drive, energy, and adaptability. And no country on earth has what India has, over 1 billion minds wired to move forward. That's not just potential, that's unstoppable momentum. And while they were busy managing decline, we were busy creating capacity. While they worried about aging populations, we were investing in education, in engineering, in entrepreneurship. They had experience, we had hunger, and hunger wins every single time. This generation, they're not waiting to be told what's possible. They're not looking for permission. They're learning code on mobile phones. They're building apps from remote villages. They're mastering AI before they ever step foot in a university. And every time one of them rises, they lift 10 more behind them. That's not population. That's acceleration. You can't contain that kind of force. You can't regulate it, suppress it, or outcompete it. This isn't a workforce. It's a force of nature. And the world's just starting to realize they weren't watching a population grow. They were watching a superpower awaken. They thought tradition would hold us back. That the weight of thousands of years would keep us stuck in time. That a culture so deeply rooted in spirituality, rituals, and ancient wisdom couldn't possibly keep pace with a world sprinting toward artificial intelligence, biotech, and space. But here's the truth. They completely misunderstood the strength of balance. Because what India has, what no other place on this planet can claim, is the ability to evolve without erasing. While the rest of the world chose between past and future, India chose both. We didn't need to abandon tradition to move forward. We used it. We drew from it. We stood on it. The Vedas weren't a relic. They were a roadmap. Meditation, once laughed at by the West, is now a billion-dollar industry. Yoga, once seen as folklore, now heals minds in every country. Ayurveda, once dismissed as ancient, now complements cutting-edge wellness. And that's the point. India didn't resist change. We guided it through a deeper lens. We didn't forget where we came from. That's why we know exactly where we're going. Think about that. Because when you know your roots, no wind can shake you. And in a time when identity is being questioned everywhere, when countries are losing themselves, trying to look like each other, India never had that problem. We already knew who we were, and because of that, we weren't chasing someone else's definition of progress. We were defining our own. See, tradition is not the enemy of progress. Confusion is. And India, we're not confused. We understand that wisdom passed down through centuries is not something to be discarded. It's something to be wielded. We knew when to pause, when to preserve, and when to push. That's not hesitation. That's precision. And look at what that balance created. Where else do you see a country building quantum computing labs next to 1,000-year-old temples? Where elders chant ancient mantras while their grandchildren design satellite propulsion systems? Where street vendors use QR codes while lighting oil lamps for Lakshmi? That's not contradiction. That's power. Because in India, modern isn't a threat to the sacred. It's the next chapter of it. Innovation doesn't require rebellion. It requires understanding. And when you understand both your past and your potential, you become unstoppable. The West couldn't see it because they measure progress in one dimension, fast and forward. But India's growth isn't linear. It spirals, like a mandala, expanding outward in all directions, simultaneously spiritual and scientific, grounded and global. Our engineers aren't just taught formulas. They're taught to think. Our scientists aren't just given tools. They're given philosophy. And our leaders aren't just chasing profit. They're driven by purpose. We aren't in a race. We're in a rise. And it's deeper than what any GDP number can measure. When the rest of the world was rushing into modernity, we were mastering duality. And now, that mastery is exactly what the world needs. Because in an age of burnout, anxiety, disconnection, and existential crisis, who do they turn to? The same country they once mocked. For mindfulness, for meaning, for a reminder that speed is useless without direction, that innovation is dangerous without integrity, that progress is hollow without peace. And now, the irony is impossible to ignore. Western nations teach our philosophies in their universities. CEOs meditate with mantras. Athletes quote the Bhagavad Gita. Scientists reference consciousness the way sages once did. The world finally sees what we never stopped knowing, that the future doesn't belong to the loudest voice. It belongs to the most grounded one. And India is grounded, rooted like the banyan tree. Vast above, infinite below. And what makes that so powerful is this: when your roots run that deep, your reach has no limit. We're not sprinting. We're expanding, thought by thought, layer by layer, and we're doing it without losing ourselves. That is India's genius. Not just to catch up, but to stay intact, to grow without becoming something else, to change the world without forgetting our own soul. Because every time we launch a satellite, we still pray before ignition. Every time we break a record, we bow to our elders. Every time we step into the future, we carry our past with reverence, not regret. This isn't nostalgia, this is alignment. This is power you cannot replicate. Other nations try to build identity from policy. We built ours from memory, from stories, from fire rituals and freedom fighters, from saints and scientists, from the rhythm of the tabla and the precision of the scalpel. And in that spectrum, from sacred to scientific, India reigns with a kind of authority no empire can impose and no algorithm can predict. And maybe that's why it's taken the world so long to understand. Because what India has created is not just a country, it's a consciousness. A presence so ancient it predates time, and yet so current it's shaping tomorrow. You can't quantify that. You can't put it in a report. You feel it when you walk the streets of Varanasi and see smartphones lighting up beside holy candles. You hear it in the voices of college students quoting Gandhi and coding at midnight. You sense it in the quiet confidence of a nation that no longer asks to be seen, because it knows it's already being followed. And the world, whether it admits it or not, is following. They're studying our models, emulating our leadership, and slowly, finally, recognizing that India didn't rise by accident. We rose by alignment, by staying true in a world that demanded we change, by being both the oldest civilization and the youngest power. That is not just rare, it's historic. So when people ask how India took over, the answer isn't just technology or population or economics, it's deeper. It's the ability to be timeless in a world obsessed with time. It's the wisdom to move forward without cutting off your past. It's the courage to grow without losing your soul. India is not rising. India has already risen. And it did so by becoming something the world didn't know how to compete with: itself. While the world got addicted to noise, to trends, to likes, to temporary wins, India was doing something else entirely. We weren't chasing viral moments. We were laying brick. Real brick, not digital facades, not empty gestures of progress, but hard, concrete foundations, railways, fiber networks, space programs, energy corridors. The kind of groundwork that doesn't show up in headlines until it becomes impossible to ignore. Because India doesn't play short games. We think in generations. We build like we plan to stay. And that's what most countries missed. They were focused on the next election. India was focused on the next era. While others were outsourcing their muscle, we were insourcing our mission. While they paid billions to import labor, talent, and technology, India developed its own. From the ground up. There's a reason our engineers are everywhere. A reason our doctors are saving lives in nearly every corner of the planet. A reason our digital infrastructure can handle billions of transactions per day. Secure, instant, and trusted. It's because we didn't just build for now. We built for what's next. When the world was obsessed with appearance, India became obsessed with ability. And that shift, that choice to invest in what works over what woes. That's the edge. While others were putting on a show, India was putting in the work. Digital payments. We didn't just adopt it. We leapfrogged legacy systems. The West was still swiping cards while India's street vendors were scanning QR codes. Rural internet. We didn't wait for towers. We expanded broadband and taught villages to build their own digital maps. Sanitation, transportation, clean energy. We tackled what others ignored, the unglamorous, the overlooked, the essential. And what made this transformation so lethal, so powerful, is that it wasn't loud, it was intentional. While the world was watching startups go viral and companies collapse just as fast, India was building unicorns that could last. Companies that weren't just designed to disrupt, they were designed to sustain. And now, everyone wants in. Everyone wants a piece of that market, that model, that mindset. But here's the catch. You can't download this. You can't fake infrastructure. You can't rush resilience. You have to build it. You have to live it. You have to earn it. And India did. Because we know that real power isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the silence before the world wakes up. It's in the engineers pulling all-nighters in Tier 2 cities. In the civil servants digitizing government systems across 1 billion identities. In the farmers checking weather updates on mobile phones. In the millions of hands, minds, and hearts doing the small things right. Every single day. That's the core. The essence. You can have all the flash in the world, but if you don't have foundation, it crumbles. And India. We've been pouring concrete while everyone else was chasing clout, and now the ground we stand on. It's not shaking, it's rising. It started quietly, one here, another there, an Indian name popping up in a global boardroom, a scientist breaking through in a world-class lab, a coder revolutionizing tech infrastructure in Silicon Valley, a CEO reshaping the future of trillion-dollar companies. The world noticed, but it didn't understand, because what they were seeing wasn't a fluke. It was the ripple effect of a nation that had been preparing its people for this very moment. And now, it's no longer a ripple. It's a wave. Indians aren't just participating in the global conversation. They're leading it, in tech, in medicine, in diplomacy, in business, and not by accident, not by luck, but by relentless preparation, by sacrifice, by an unshakable belief that competence needs no introduction. When a country focuses on sharpening its minds instead of polishing its image, this is what happens. You don't create followers. You create leaders. There's a reason the world's biggest companies are being helmed by people who once walked barefoot to school, who studied by candlelight, who carried both legacy and hunger on their shoulders. They were built in pressure, refined in struggle, and now they walk into global meetings not to prove something, but to set the tone. This isn't about diversity hires. This isn't optics. This is what happens when a nation trains its people not just to succeed, but to withstand, to endure, to think beyond survival. Because when you've grown up with limitations, you don't just innovate, you redefine the rules. Indian doctors are not just working in international hospitals. They're transforming how healthcare is delivered, how surgeries are performed, how systems are rebuilt. Our scientists are not just contributing to global breakthroughs. They're leading them in nuclear technology, climate science, biotechnology, and space exploration. And our entrepreneurs, they're not just building apps. They're building empires. Scalable, sustainable, and born from real-world problems, not boardroom fantasies. The world sees an Indian face and finally associates it with excellence. But we've known it all along, because excellence wasn't taught to us. It was demanded from the moment we could walk. From classrooms packed beyond capacity. From families who had nothing except expectations. From a culture that celebrates effort as much as outcome. And that's where greatness is forged. In discipline, not luxury. We didn't wait to be accepted. We became undeniable. And that's the real shift. It's no longer a surprise to see Indian leadership in every corner of the globe. It's the new standard, because when a nation stops outsourcing its pride and starts insourcing its purpose, its people stop looking for permission and start taking position. India never needed to clap back. We never needed to scream. We belong. Because the truth is, we already knew. The world threw every label, every stereotype, every headline at us. And we didn't flinch. We didn't react with outrage. We responded with outcomes. And that's the difference. That's power. Because when you're secure in your purpose, you don't waste energy trying to be understood. You use that energy to build. And that's exactly what India did. They said we were too slow, too poor, too divided, too chaotic. But we didn't sit there trying to defend ourselves in the court of global opinion. We weren't chasing their applause. We were busy becoming undeniable. Every insult they threw, we absorbed. Every doubt they cast, we archived. We weren't offended. We were focused. Because while they were writing us off, we were writing code. While they were doubting our potential, we were designing satellites. While they laughed at our accents, we were mastering every industry they thought they owned. That's not revenge. That's resilience. The kind that doesn't need to shout back, because results speak louder than rhetoric. And the beauty is, India didn't rise from rebellion. We rose from discipline. Every student who studied under a streetlight. Every family that sacrificed everything so one child could go to college. Every entrepreneur who built a business from scratch with no safety net. That's not about reaction. That's about vision. It wasn't emotional. It was strategic. Quiet, deliberate, persistent action. Over years. Over decades. That's what makes it so powerful. Because when you react, you're giving someone else control. But when you stay focused, when you hold your line and keep building in the face of being overlooked, you don't just succeed. You dominate. And now the very people who once ignored us are turning their heads. Not because we asked them to, but because they have no choice. India didn't rise to prove the world wrong. We rose to prove ourselves right. That's the difference between noise and legacy, between impulse and impact. And while they were busy calculating our failures, we were busy compounding our progress. So no, we didn't respond with rage. We responded with reach, with results, with reality. And now the world doesn't just hear India. It listens, because nothing commands attention more than a nation that chose power over pity, precision over pride, focus over fury. That's the kind of rise you don't recover from. You just try to catch up. So now the world is watching, wide-eyed, asking, how did this happen? But the truth is, it didn't just happen. It was built, fought for, earned. India didn't rise overnight. India rose over centuries of resilience, generations of grit, and a culture that never forgot who it was. Even when the world tried to define it otherwise, this isn't a victory lap. This is a declaration. India is not a future superpower. India is the superpower, not just in numbers, not just in economy, not just in influence, but in spirit, in mindset, in identity. While the world overslept, we outworked. While they talked about potential, we became the proof. So understand this clearly. We're not stepping into the spotlight. We are the spotlight now, and we're not asking to be seen. We've already taken our place. The world woke up too late. India has already taken over.